"Sir, are you my new daddy?" The question drifted softly through the sterile corridor of St. Alden's Hospital, halting the footsteps of every echo. The rain tapped steadily against the tall glass windows, the gray London skies casting muted light across the linoleum floor. Oliver Bennett, 34, a sharply dressed medical tech CEO, froze mid-stride. He wasn't meant to be here, not in this particular corridor, not in this particular moment. He'd come only to finalize paperwork for the donation of his 5-year-old daughter's organs. Little Sophie had died in a car accident a fortnight earlier, and today was meant to bring closure. It didn't. As Oliver stared blankly at the reflection in the hospital window, pale, hollow-eyed, guilt etched into his every feature, his mind wandered to Sophie's last birthday. He hadn't made it in time. A board meeting had run late. She had waited, her pink cupcake untouched, her paper crown slipping sideways as she whispered, "Daddy will come soon." But he never did. That was a memory that now clung to him like fog. Then something tugged at his sleeve. He looked down. A tiny girl, no more than 4, with messy blonde curls and hospital wristbands, peeked up at him with enormous brown eyes. "Are you my new daddy?" she repeated. In one arm she clutched a faded teddy. In the other, a trailing IV line gently swayed behind her. There was no hint of fear in her voice, only a quiet certainty. Oliver blinked, confused. Who was she? Why did her presence feel like sunlight breaking through thick clouds? And then she whispered, "My new heart beats when you're near." The words lodged deep in Oliver's chest like a heartbeat of their own. Her hand pressed over her chest, right where her gown covered the spot where her transplanted heart lay. Sophie's heart. Though she couldn't possibly know, Oliver knew. In that moment, every breath he took felt tethered to the tiny girl in front of him. He knelt beside her, his voice raw. "When you smile, I feel something I thought I'd lost." She tilted her head. "That's my heart, it just knows." And in the strange stillness of that corridor, in a world where grief had consumed him, Oliver Bennett felt the faintest flicker of something he thought impossible. Hope. Little did he know this was only the beginning. Emma Carter had never trusted men in suits. She had learned long ago that kindness from people with power was usually fleeting, dropped like loose change on a pavement, never meant to be held on to. 4 years ago, she had stood at this very hospital window, Lucy in her arms, bald from chemotherapy and begging for medication they couldn't afford. A well-dressed doctor had brushed her aside with a cold smile. Charity funds are full. That memory stayed lodged in her chest like a splinter. So when she turned the corner that afternoon and found her daughter, her fragile, bright Lucy, holding hands with a stranger in an expensive tailored shirt, her heart clenched. "Lucy," she called sharply, her voice cracking through the quiet. The child turned and smiled innocently. "Hi, Mummy. This is my new friend. He has kind eyes." Emma's gaze darted to the man. He stood slowly, his hands lifted in a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low, his tone apologetic rather than defensive. "She came up to me." Emma tightened her grip on her daughter's shoulder, instinct screaming to protect, but then she looked closer. His eyes were rimmed red, his expression hollow, but there was something genuine, something broken. He introduced himself quietly. "Oliver Bennett." The name alone made Emma stiffen. Everyone in St. Alden's knew it. CEO of Bennett Medical, the firm that had helped fund the hospital's new wing. He was untouchable, someone who lived in glass towers, not the drafty flats Emma cleaned to make ends meet. She straightened her posture out of habit, her voice polite but edged. "I'm sorry if she disturbed you. Lucy's very friendly." He shook his head gently. "She didn't disturb me, not at all." For a moment silence stretched between them. Lucy beamed, still gripping her teddy in one hand and Oliver's sleeve in the other. "I told him my new heart likes him," she chirped. Emma blinked, startled by her daughter's strange choice of words. She tried to brush it off with a half smile. "She's poetic like that sometimes." But Oliver didn't smile the way she expected. He swallowed hard, his gaze locked on Lucy, his face pale as though her words had cut through him. "It's not poetry," he said softly. "It's truth." Emma didn't understand. Not then. She only knew there was something in his expression that unsettled her, something raw she couldn't name. She ushered Lucy gently back toward her room, nodding once in guarded thanks before leaving him standing alone in the corridor. Yet that night, As she tucked her daughter into bed, Lucy whispered, "Mummy, he feels like home." Emma's breath caught, and she turned away before Lucy could see the tears sting her eyes. Because despite herself, despite every instinct built from years of disappointment, she felt it too. That this stranger, this powerful man who had no place in her world, had not walked into their lives by accident. The following morning, Oliver found himself drawn back to the hospital gardens, a place he hadn't visited in years. The roses there had just begun to bloom despite the lingering chill of late February, their petals glistening from the drizzle. He spotted them almost immediately. Emma sat on a weathered bench, her hair loosely tied back, her daughter curled beside her with crayons scattered across her lap. Lucy's hospital gown hung loose around her thin frame, but her face was glowing with concentration as she pressed a bright red crayon across her clipboard. Oliver hesitated before approaching, but Lucy saw him first. Her face lit up and she waved so enthusiastically that her teddy bear nearly slipped from her grasp. "Mr. Nice," she called, her small voice carrying across the quiet garden. Emma looked up then, startled but not unkind. Her smile came hesitantly, touched with caution, but it was more sincere than yesterday's. "She insisted on some sunshine today," Emma explained softly as Oliver drew closer, "even if it's filtered through clouds." He crouched down to Lucy's level, his suit jacket creasing as he leaned forward. "What are you drawing?" he asked gently. Lucy turned the clipboard towards him. On the page was a large, uneven, heart-colored bright red, too big for the paper. Inside it were 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a wobbly sky, one with long yellow hair labeled Mummy, another small one marked Me, and beside them a taller figure with dark scribbles for hair. "That's you," she said proudly, tapping the drawing. "My heart friend." Oliver blinked, his throat tightening, but before he could respond, Lucy added, "The girl who gave me my beat is here too." Her tiny finger pointed to a smaller star drawn in the corner, shining above them. Emma froze. She glanced at Oliver, her eyes searching his face. "She says that sometimes," she explained, her voice hushed, almost apologetic. "Ever since the transplant. Like the heart. Talks to her." Oliver's chest constricted, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "Do you ever tell her about the donor?" he asked, his voice careful. Emma shook her head slowly. "They won't tell us, only that it was a girl, same age, same blood type. They called it a miracle." Her voice broke slightly on the word. "The call came at 2:08 a.m. I'll never forget that sound." Oliver's stomach twisted violently, as though the world had tilted beneath him. His own memory collided with hers. The phone call that shattered his life the very same night, the moment doctors had told him Sophie, his little girl, was gone, but that her organs might save another. He felt the sting of tears, sharp and unforgiving, but he turned his gaze quickly to Lucy, who was now humming softly, swinging her legs against the bench in perfect rhythm with the tune Sophie used to sing at bedtime. His heart threatened to break all over again. He could barely breathe. That night, he sat in his car in the dimly lit hospital car park, the glow from the dashboard casting shadows across his face. His laptop lay open on the passenger seat, the transplant log staring back at him with stark black and white finality. Recipient, Lucille Jane Carter, age 4. Donor, Sophie Elise Bennett, age 5. The words blurred through his tears, but there was no escaping them. His daughter's heart beat inside the little girl who had looked him in the eye and said, "My heart beats when you're near." For the first time since Sophie's death, Oliver wept not only for what he had lost, but for what had been given back, a chance, however fragile, to see his daughter's light carried forward. He let the tears fall freely, his chest heaving because he finally understood. This wasn't chance. This wasn't coincidence. Sophie had not simply left. She had found her way into another child's chest, into another family's life, and somehow into his. The revelation weighed heavily on Oliver, and he knew he could not keep it hidden forever. Days passed, each one filled with a tension he could neither release nor control. His footsteps lingered too long outside room 4C, his gaze rested too often on Lucy, and Emma began to sense it. One evening, under the dim lights of an older hospital corridor rarely used, Oliver finally asked Emma to meet him. The walls there bore faint cracks, the bulbs flickered with age, and the quiet was thick enough to make his pulse feel louder than it should. He stood by the window, hands pressed to the cold glass when she arrived. Emma's expression carried that familiar guarded politeness, but beneath it flickered something raw, curiosity mixed with fear. "Is Lucy all right?" she asked quickly, her voice sharpened by a mother's instinct. "She's fine," Oliver replied, his tone firm but gentle. He turned to face her, every word a weight he had carried too long. "It's not about her health, it's about her heart." Emma's brow furrowed, confusion spreading across her features. He took a step forward, steadying himself against the tide of emotion threatening to undo him. "Lucy has Sophie's heart," he said quietly, each syllable breaking the silence like glass on stone. Emma froze, her face draining of color. For a long moment she seemed unable to breathe, unable even to blink. When his daughter's name left his lips, something shattered in her eyes. "No," she whispered, as if the word itself might undo what she had heard. Oliver nodded once slowly. The dates, the match. It was Sophie. "My daughter." The air thickened between them, the corridor narrowing to just the two of them and the unbearable truth now laid bare. Emma pressed her hands to her mouth, a sound escaping that was half gasp, half cry. At first Oliver thought she would thank him, or at least cry with him in shared grief. Instead her eyes hardened, tears cutting lines across her cheeks. "Is that why you've been here?" she demanded, her voice trembling but fierce. "All this time, was it about her, or about your daughter?" Oliver tried to speak, but his throat tightened. "Emma, She cut across him, her pain spilling out like floodwater breaking a dam. "You called her Sophie 2 nights ago when you hugged her. Don't deny it. You whispered her name." His breath caught, the memory striking him like a blow. He hadn't meant to, hadn't realized until it was too late. But the truth of it hung between them like a shadow. "You set up funds. You offered help. You appear whenever you please, like it's your right. And I was so grateful I didn't see it." Her voice cracked. "You're not here for Lucy. You're here for a ghost." "That's not true," Oliver said desperately, stepping closer. "Emma, please, But she stepped back, shaking her head, eyes wild with fear. "You're powerful, wealthy, connected. What happens if one day you decide she belongs to you, because her heart once belonged to Sophie? What happens when you decide my daughter isn't mine anymore?" Her words cut him open, sharper than any knife. "Emma," he whispered, his voice raw. "I lost Sophie, yes. I loved her with everything I had, and yes, I see her in Lucy sometimes. But I don't want to take her from you. I could never. I need to be near her, near you, because she's the reason I'm still breathing." Before Emma could reply, a small voice drifted down the corridor. "Am I not good enough for my new heart?" Lucy stood in her socks, her stuffed bear dangling from one hand, her big eyes glistening with confusion. Both adults froze. Oliver's chest caved in and he dropped instantly to his knees, arms outstretched. Lucy stepped forward slowly, tears quivering in her lashes. "Mummy's upset because of me." No, sweetheart," Oliver said, gathering her into his arms, holding her against his chest with a desperation that broke his voice. "You're the only reason mine still beats. Do you hear me? The only reason." His words trembled in the dim light, but they were the truest he had ever spoken. Emma stood frozen, her whole body trembling as she watched them, her daughter clinging to the man she had just accused, the man whose broken heart mirrored her own. And in that fragile moment she understood. Oliver was not trying to replace anyone, he was just trying not to disappear. After that night in the hospital corridor, Emma pulled away. She told herself it was for Lucy's sake, that putting distance between them would untangle the confusion, but in truth, it was fear that drove her. Fear that she had opened her life too much, too soon, to a man whose world was too big and whose pain was too raw. She swapped her shifts where she could, worked mornings instead of nights, and rearranged Lucy's follow-up appointments to earlier slots so Oliver would never happen to be there. Whenever his name lit up her phone, she silenced it, convincing herself that ignoring him was an act of protection, not cruelty. Yet every time she declined a call, her chest tightened as though she had pulled a thread too taut, and something inside her was beginning to tear. Oliver still lingered in the background. Nurses mentioned they had seen him in the waiting area, sitting quietly with a book in his lap, leaving just before Emma and Lucy arrived. Once a neighbor said he had been spotted outside the flat late at night, standing by his car, engine idling but unmoving, as though he couldn't quite bring himself to knock on the door. Emma ignored it all, buried herself in work and caring for Lucy. But silence settled thick between them. And silence, she realized too late, was not neutral. It weighed on Lucy like a storm cloud. The little girl, who once squealed with joy whenever Mr. Nice appeared, now sat quietly by the window, her bear balanced on her knees, her eyes fixed on the blurred gardens below. Meals went untouched, soup cooled and jelly congealed without her lifting a spoon. She grew restless at night, tossing in her small hospital bed, clutching her bear to her chest and whispering his name into the dark, Mr. Nice, as though summoning him might make the silence break. Emma told herself that children forget quickly, that Lucy's sadness would fade, but every day she watched the brightness in her daughter dim, like a candle flickering low in its holder. One evening, as Emma guided Lucy's toothbrush gently over her small teeth, Lucy paused mid-motion, her little face tilted upward, eyes round with a seriousness too old for her 4 years. "Mummy," she whispered, her voice trembling, "did Mr. Nice go away because of my question?" The toothbrush slipped in Emma's hand, her throat tightening until she could hardly breathe. She swallowed hard, blinking fast against the tears threatening to spill. "No, sweetheart," she said carefully, tucking a stray curl behind Lucy's ear. "Sometimes grown-ups just need time." Lucy nodded, though the dimness in her eyes deepened. She returned to brushing, but Emma could see the weight of the answer settling on her small shoulders. Later that night, after tucking Lucy into bed, Emma unpacked the small overnight bag her daughter carried everywhere. Nestled beneath the folded pajamas and a well-worn scarf was something Emma had never seen before, a faded envelope, its edges softened by touch and time. In shaky but loving handwriting across the front it read, "To Sophie, from Dad." Emma froze. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free, the dim lamplight casting shadows across the walls. She unfolded the paper inside, breath catching as her eyes moved over the words, the ink smudged in places where tears had once fallen. "Dear Sophie, someone is smiling today because of you. She laughs like you. She loves like you. Her eyes are different, but they shine just the same. She makes me remember what joy feels like, what it means to hold a hand that still believes in tomorrow. Thank you for being my light even when I'm lost in the dark. Love, Dad." Emma's vision blurred as she read it again and again, her tears falling freely now. She looked over at Lucy, her chest rising and falling softly in sleep, her little hand curled protectively around her bear. Emma pressed the letter to her chest, and in that moment something inside her shifted. She no longer saw Lucy's survival as a borrowed gift from someone else's tragedy. It wasn't a cruel twist of fate. It was a trust. Sophie's heart had not been given away. It had been entrusted, and Oliver had been left with nothing but the echo of that trust to keep him alive. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to see Oliver differently, not as a man trying to replace her child with memories of his own, but as a father drowning in grief who had found one small way to keep breathing. She whispered into the quiet, barely louder than the hum of the machines, "He's hurting too, baby. Maybe he needs us the way we need him." Her voice broke, but beneath it, hope stirred, fragile yet steady. And though fear still lingered, Emma felt something she hadn't dared to for years. A beginning. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue, but the chance to let grief and love walk side by side. It was a Tuesday evening when Emma finally broke the silence. Her phone buzzed with an unsent message draft she had been rewriting for days, her thumb hovering nervously before she pressed send. "Dinner with us. Just us. No emojis, no explanation. Just a fragile invitation that felt heavier than anything she had written in years." When Oliver received it, he sat staring at the words for a long time. In boardrooms, his signature could close multi-million-pound deals in minutes, but this single message left him shaking. He typed back only, "I'd like that, thank you." Now, standing outside Emma's modest flat on the edge of the city, Oliver felt more nervous than he had in a lifetime of negotiations. He held a small bag of groceries in one hand and a bouquet of daisies in the other, the kind his daughter Sophie once called happy flowers. When Emma opened the door, her soft sweater and loosely tied hair framed a face still shadowed by worry, but beneath it something new glimmered, resolve. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," Oliver replied, stepping in, his voice low, almost reverent. Before any more words could pass, Lucy darted down the hallway barefoot, her pajamas wrinkled from play. "You came," she squealed, throwing herself into his arms with the kind of reckless trust only children know. Oliver caught her easily, holding her close, his chest aching at the tiny heartbeat fluttering against him. "I missed you," she whispered into his ear. "I missed you too, princess," he murmured, kissing the crown of her golden curls. Emma stood by the doorway, watching silently, her throat tight. Something about seeing them together, the ease, the sincerity, made her both terrified and deeply moved. Dinner was simple: chicken soup, bread rolls, and apple slices. But to Oliver, it felt like a feast. Lucy chattered endlessly, telling stories about her drawings, how the soup was extra soupy, and how her bear now slept on the left side of the bed because her heart was busy on the right. Emma mostly listened, her eyes flickering between Oliver and Lucy with quiet caution, but also with gratitude that grew harder to hide. For the first time in months, laughter mingled with the clinking of spoons. When the meal ended, Lucy vanished into her room, announcing that she had a big surprise. Oliver and Emma cleared the table together in near silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, just unpracticed. The sound of running water, the squeak of old floorboards, and the brushing of sleeves became the music of a moment neither of them wanted to break too quickly. When Lucy returned, she clutched a sheet of paper with both hands as though it were treasure. She presented it with solemn pride. "I made this today," she announced. On the page, 3 stick figures stood hand in hand beneath a purple sky, stars twinkling above them. One star was labeled Sophie, the other Us. At the center of the drawing, a small red heart glowed between them. Oliver's hands trembled as he took it, his eyes glassy. Emma looked at him sideways, her breath catching at the rawness on his face. He knelt to Lucy's level, his voice barely steady. "This is beautiful. You gave us both a sky." Lucy nodded with childlike seriousness. Everyone needs a place to shine. Something inside Oliver broke open. He looked up at Emma, meeting her gaze with a vulnerability that left no space for pretense. "I thought I came here to say goodbye," he admitted softly, "but maybe I came here to start again." Emma's breath faltered. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the edge of the drawing where his hand rested. "I don't know where this is going," she whispered, voice trembling. "I still have fears." Oliver nodded. "So do I. I'm not the man I was before. I'm just a father who lost everything and somehow found a little heartbeat to believe in again." Lucy, oblivious to the weight in the room, wrapped her arms around both of them, pressing her cheek against their joined hands. "Then maybe," Emma said, her voice steadier now, "we start small, with soup and drawings and just being there." Oliver nodded, covering her hand with his. Outside, the city carried on, buses rumbling, lights flickering. But inside that tiny flat, there was a different kind of stillness. Not silence, but the fragile peace that comes when broken hearts make room for hope. The small flat was filled with mismatched balloons, streamers taped clumsily across the doorframe, and the sweet scent of vanilla cake baking in the oven. It wasn't a grand celebration, but it was everything Lucy had wished for. She twirled into the kitchen, wearing a pink dress slightly too big for her, a cardboard crown slipping over her golden curls. "Am I princess enough?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. Oliver scooped her into his arms, spinning her in a circle before pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You're more than a princess," he whispered. "You're the queen of all hearts, even broken ones." Emma stood at the counter, her hands still dusted with flour, watching them with tears glistening in her eyes. When it was time for the cake, Lucy climbed onto a chair, 5 candles flickering before her. Oliver crouched beside her, Emma resting her hands gently on her daughter's shoulders. For a moment, the 3 of them formed a picture of something Emma never thought she'd see again, a family bound not by blood, but by love reborn through loss. Lucy leaned close to the candles, her little face serious. "This time," she whispered softly, "I light it for you, Sophie." With a single breath, she blew out the flames, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. Oliver reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver locket. Inside was Sophie's smiling face, radiant and forever young. He placed it gently beside the cake, his voice catching as he said, "Happy birthday, Lucy. And thank you, Sophie, for giving us this second chance." Emma slipped her arm around him, and for the first time in years, Oliver felt peace settle in his chest. Not the peace of forgetting, but the peace of learning that love, even broken, can still bloom again.